As You Like It, Part 1. Oliver and Orlando, Rosalind and Celia. Deep in the Forest of Arden lived a merry company. The Duke of that country, banished by his usurping brother Frederick, had taken refuge among the green woods, and there, far from the pomp and envious clamor of court, he lived happily with a few faithful followers. Custom had made this new life sweeter than the old one of showy state. Here were no fawning courtiers, no slander and intrigue. The only hardships were those of the changing seasons. Even when the keen winds of winter made the Duke shrink with cold, he would smile and say, "This is no flattery. These are counselors that make me feel really what I am." And the biting blast seemed to him less cruel than the falsehood and ingratitude of men. Not far from the forest was the house that had formerly belonged to a good gentleman, Sir Rowland de Boys. Dying, Sir Rowland had left all his possessions to his eldest son, Oliver, excepting 1,000 crowns, which was to go to the youngest son, Orlando. Sir Rowland, however, had charged Oliver to bring up his two brothers carefully. Oliver had sent the second son, Jaques, to school, where the boy did well. But his youngest brother, Orlando, he kept at home, leaving him utterly neglected and without any sort of training. Not only did Oliver do nothing at all for his brother, but he even tried to take away what advantages Orlando possessed by nature. He made him feed with the servants, debarred him his place as brother, and in every way possible seemed to aim at unfitting him for his position as a gentleman. Orlando was indignant at such treatment, and at last he rebelled openly, declaring he would endure such servitude no longer. There was an angry dispute between the young men, in which Oliver, as usual, tried to bully his brother into submission. But Orlando's spirit was up. Stung to fury by Oliver's insults, he seized hold of him and compelled him to listen to what he had to say. A faithful old servitor of the father's interposed and tried to make peace, but Orlando was determined not to yield.
"You shall hear me,"
he said as Oliver struggled to free himself.
"My father charged you in his will to give me a good education. You have trained me like a peasant, hiding from me all gentlemanlike qualities. The spirit of my father grows strong in me, and I will no longer endure it. Therefore, allow me such exercises as becomes a gentleman, or give me the poor portion my father left me in his will, and with that I will go seek my fortune."
"And what will you do with it? Beg, when that is spent," sneered Oliver. "Well, sir, get you in. I will not be troubled with you much longer. You shall have part of what you wish. I pray you leave me." And then, turning to the old servant Adam, he added savagely, "Get you with him, you old dog." "Is old dog my reward?" said Adam sadly. "Most true. I've lost my teeth in your service. God be with my old master. He would not have spoken such a word." But Oliver had a plan for getting rid of his younger brother, and that without expending 1,000 crowns. Charles, the wrestler of the usurping duke, was to show his skill the following day at court, and Oliver knew it was Orlando's intention to try a match with this famous athlete. This report had also privately reached the ears of the wrestler. Charles was a most powerful opponent, deadly in skill and strength. Being a friend of Oliver's, and not wishing to harm the young Orlando, he came to Oliver's house to warn him and dissuade his brother from making the attempt, or at least to let him know, in the event of any injury happening to Orlando, that it would be entirely of the boy's own seeking, and altogether against Charles's will. Oliver thanked Charles for his kind thought, and said he had himself tried by every means to dissuade Orlando, but that he was resolute. "I tell you, Charles, he is the stubbornest young fellow in France," Oliver said maliciously. "Full of ambition, envious of every man's good parts. A secret and villainous contriver against me, his own brother. Therefore, use your discretion. I had as lief you broke his neck as his finger, and you had better be on your guard. If you do him any slight disgrace, or if he fails to win glory for himself, he will practice against you by poison, entrap you by some treacherous device, and never leave you till he has taken your life by some indirect means or other. For I assure you, and I speak it almost with tears, there is no one living at this day so young and so villainous."
"I am heartily glad I came to you," he said. "If he comes tomorrow, I'll give him his payment."
And away he went, vowing to punish Orlando. "Now I'll stir up the youngster," thought Oliver. "I hope I shall soon see the end of him, for though I don't know why, I have an absolute hatred of the boy. Yet he is gentle, never schooled, and yet learned, full of noble device, enchantingly beloved by everyone, indeed so much in the hearts of all, especially of my own people, that I am altogether thrown in the shade. But it shall not be so long. This wrestler will put it all right. Nothing remains but to make the boy more eager for the wrestling, and that I'll go and do at once." Rosalind and Celia. When the rightful duke was sent into banishment, Frederick, the usurping duke, allowed his daughter Rosalind to stay on at court, to be a companion to his own young daughter, Celia. The cousins had been brought up together from their cradles, and were so devoted to each other that if Rosalind had been sent into banishment, Celia would either have followed her or died of grief at the separation. Celia strove by all the means in her power to cheer her cousin's sorrow for the loss of her father, and assured her that when Duke Frederick died, she would never consent to be his heir, but would immediately restore to Rosalind all that he had wrongfully taken away. Rosalind's own nature was too bright and happy to waste time in useless repining, and her deep affection for her cousin made her respond very willingly to Celia's loving attempts at consolation. The girl's gay wit and merry chatter never failed, and their leisure moments found additional food for entertainment in the whimsical utterances of the court fool, or jester, Touchstone. Under his apparent nonsense often lay hidden much quaint philosophy, and Touchstone found his fool's motley a convenient cloak for leveling many a sharp-edged shaft of truth at his hearers. On the day appointed for the wrestling match, Rosalind and Celia were among the spectators. Charles had already shown his prowess by speedily overthrowing one after the other 3 goodly young men. Now they all lay on the ground with broken ribs, and their poor old father made such a doleful lament over his 3 sons that all the beholders took his part and wept in sympathy. When Orlando appeared as the next champion, there was a general feeling of dismay and compassion. What chance had this slender lad against the doughty Charles? Duke Frederick, in pity for his youth, would have fain dissuaded him, but he would not be entreated. Rosalind and Celia then tried, but even they were not more successful. Orlando thanked them courteously, but refused to give up the attempt. Since their entreaties were of no avail, the only thing the ladies could do was to bestow on him their best wishes, and this they did most heartily. The result was a surprise to all. Orlando was the victor, and this time it was the redoubtable Charles who was carried senseless from the field. Duke Frederick was interested enough in the young wrestler to inquire who he was, but was far from pleased to learn he was a son of Sir Rowland de Boys. Sir Rowland was an honorable gentleman, but he had been no friend to the usurping duke. Rosalind's father, on the contrary, had loved Sir Rowland dearly, and by the rest of the world he had been equally esteemed. Celia was hurt by her father's churlish remarks to Orlando, and tried to make up for them by some kind and gracious words. Rosalind, equally moved, took a chain from her neck and gave it to the young victor. Gentlemen, wear this for me, one out of suit with fortune, who could give more but that her hand lacks means. Orlando would fain have expressed his thanks, but some strange feeling held him speechless. He had overcome the mighty Charles, but he could not master this stronger champion. He was still musing over what had passed, when one of the lords-in-waiting, Le Beau, came to him, and counseled him in friendship to leave the place at once. Duke Frederick had taken a prejudice against him, and was likely to resent everything he did. "I thank you," said Orlando. "Pray tell me one thing. Which of those two ladies was the daughter of the Duke who was here at the wrestling?" Le Beau answered that it was the smaller of the two ladies. The other was the daughter of the banished Duke, detained by her usurping uncle to keep his own daughter company. "But I can tell you," continued Le Beau, "that lately this Duke Frederick has taken a violent displeasure against his gentle niece, for no other reason than that the people love her for her virtues, and pity her for her good father's sake. I am quite sure his malice against the lady will suddenly break forth." Then Le Beau took a courteous farewell, and Orlando went his way, lost in a dream, and murmuring, "Heavenly Rosalind." For her part, Rosalind had been equally attracted by the gallant young wrestler, and when Celia began to rally her about her pensive looks, she was quite ready to admit the truth. "In good earnest," said Celia, "is it possible that you should suddenly take so strong a liking for Sir Rowland's youngest son?" "The Duke, my father, loved his father dearly," urged Rosalind in self-excuse. "Does it therefore follow that you should love his son dearly?" laughed Celia. "By this sort of reasoning, I should hate him, for my father hated his father dearly. And yet I do not hate Orlando." "No, faith, for my sake do not hate him," said Rosalind. "Love him, because I do." The cousins were interrupted by Duke Frederick, who entered hurriedly, his eyes full of anger. What Le Beau foretold had come to pass. The Duke's displeasure against Rosalind had been growing for some time, for he was jealous at her being so universally beloved, and alarmed for the safety of his own position. Now, in a few curt words, he ordered her to leave the court, saying that if in 10 days' time she were still found within 20 miles of it, she should be put to death. Rosalind was amazed and indignant, but all appeals were useless. Celia in vain tried to plead for her cousin. Duke Frederick would listen to no reason. He declared that Rosalind was a traitor, subtle enough to steal the affections of the people away from Celia herself, and that once she was gone, Celia would shine to far greater advantage. The sentence he pronounced was irrevocable. Rosalind was banished. "Pronounce that sentence then on me, my liege," said Celia. "I cannot live out of her company." "You are a fool," was the Duke's contemptuous answer. Then to Rosalind he added, "You needs provide yourself. If you stay longer than the time, you die." When her father left them, Celia again strove to cheer her cousin. She utterly refused to be parted from her, insisted on sharing her griefs, and declared that, no matter what Rosalind said, she intended to go with her. "Why, whither shall we go?" asked Rosalind. "To seek my uncle in the Forest of Arden," replied Celia. "We'll have a marshal outside." This was a good suggestion, and in order to avoid the danger of two high-born and beautiful maidens traveling alone, it was further agreed that Celia should stain her face brown and attire herself in mean apparel, while Rosalind, who was tall of stature, should for better security disguise herself as a youth, armed with curtle-axe and with a boar spear in her hand. "Let what fear there will lie hidden in my woman's heart," she said gaily. "At least we'll have a dashing and martial outside." In their new guise, Rosalind declared she would take no worse a name than Jove's own page, Ganymede, while Celia, in reference to her own banished state, thought that Aliena would be a very suitable name for herself. "Cousin," said Rosalind, "what if we tried to steal the clownish fool out of your father's court? Would he not be a comfort to us in our travels?" Celia was delighted with the suggestion. "Touchstone will go with me all over the wide world," she said. "Leave me alone to manage him. Now let us go get our money and jewels together, and devise the fittest time and safest way to hide from the pursuit that will be made when my flight is known. Come, we go contentedly, to liberty, and not to banishment."